Hello, everybody. How are you doing? For those of you who know me, you know I don't really talk like this. But on the first day of class, people often think Usually I see a sea of shocked faces. What? He talks like us? I do talk like most of you because I was born and raised in Canada, born up in the Northwest Territories. What my dad was doing there, I'm not sure. But he was the type who took on challenges, and he took on a challenge. One motivation he had was because someone said to him, there's no way Indian people can survive in this cold. Wrong thing to say. It's a minor comment. Other Indian people were there in other communities, but in that community, it was my dad initially. And he decided to stay, in part because, as he explained it to me, he wanted to prove that he was a human being. And many of us in our lives may have to prove that we are human beings. And time and time again, I know I've had to do that. Sometimes you have to remind yourselves, especially right before exams, that you are a human being. Sometimes we need to remind universities that students are, believe it or not, human beings. My title of this talk is Academia. This is, you can take whatever meaning you want to take away from that. I don't want to lose my job. But it's also the way that my son, 3-year-old son, pronounces academia, which is appropriate. I think it's perfect as a way to keep all of academia humble. We should refer to it from now on as academia. Because you have to be dumb in order to go and learn something, no matter what it is. At some point, you have to admit that you don't know something. And those of you who've taken my classes, you know that I stress that. It's okay to say you don't know, right? Any of you remember that? I hope so. When you admit you don't know something, then you can do something with it. You can develop, you can change, you can alter. And that process is not always easy. That process is difficult. But we get comfortable, maybe too comfortable, with thinking that we know things. And if you don't know now, when you have kids, you'll know how much you don't know, how incapable you are, and how there's always so much more to learn. But I know that many of you already know that you don't know. How much do you think this water bottle costs in India? It'd be like 30 rupees, I would probably say, probably something like that. And it wouldn't be clear, so we're very lucky. This is why Punjab has a drinking problem. I'm pretty sure it's because, well, if it's bad water or alcohol, you know. You can get a buzz from both. But you get sick with one of them, so. Okay. I have a point to my talk. I'm not quite sure what it is. And in making this presentation, I had too many ideas. And I don't want to keep you here all night. And I can't remember my password now. Tyus, did you change it? You probably did. How many of you know how to do an Indian accent? Oh. You can search it on Google, apparently. Anybody know how? Can you do it? How many? Clap. How many of you know how to do an Indian accent? Oh, that's good. Okay, very good. If you don't know how, I'm going to teach you right now. Because at least if you get one thing away from this lecture, you have some practical skill. So, what you need to do is, first of all, go to an Indian restaurant. Because you have to soak in the environment. Be with the people. See how they behave, how they move, how they act. And then you order the hottest samosa you can find. And as soon as you bite into it, automatically you will start talking. It's hot. I need some water. All Indian people sound like me. It's just when you eat that food, hard. It happens. I stopped eating that food. That's all it is. That's all. I grew up in a small town up north. That town does not exist anymore. Isn't that bizarre? That town does not exist anymore. It was a mining town. And my dad worked there for a while until the mine was about to shut down, and we came here. But while we lived up there in the very early years, I remember our house was the entire ethnic community. Our house was Millwoods. Which is exciting for many reasons. Also can be a bit challenging at times. And we're surrounded by snow in winter, which really made me stand out. I couldn't hide. I wanted to be invisible, but I couldn't. I stood out. And I asked my dad, why did you decide to move there? And he said, initially he just came to Canada to visit. He just came to visit. And he wanted to see Christmas. And what better place to see Christmas than Canada? And then when he found out about the North, he kind of thought, hey, it's even a better place to see Christmas. Which now, I'm thinking maybe he was looking for Santa Claus. Because Santa Claus, if you see him, from my dad's background in India, and you look at Santa Claus, you kind of think, he looks kind of like a Sikh, doesn't he? He look the beard and everything. So I suspected as a kid that was the real reason that he was coming to Canada, that he was looking for Santa Claus. He said that his motivation was to stay here was once he found out about the education system. He said once he found out about free education, public education, then he thought this is the best place to settle because he wanted us to get educated. He wanted to get educated, but at the time in India he couldn't. His family situation and so on. He went to grade 10, which was the highest he could go, and then after that he did some. I think it was Khalsa College. It was called. He did some courses there, but he couldn't pursue it. He had to work. He was working at a young age, and he kept working his entire life. Hard worker. But I still think that maybe my dad came just for Santa Claus. And the thing is, the similarity between Santa Claus and a Sikh is much more thorough than just the appearance. Because I had an uncle, and Santa is an actual name. That was his name. So when I saw him, and he had the beard, and he was an electrician. Think about it. Christmas lights, huh? So when I met him, I thought, this is Santa's help. This has got to be this is Santa's thing. This is what it is. Santa Claus is outsourcing. I was wrong, though. It wasn't outsourcing. But we enjoyed a nice education there. My family, I don't know if can you see my wife from UAlberta, Moti United? There she is. She's from Eastern Europe. And like she's from Eastern Europe. Not like, when I say I'm from Canada, and then people are like, no, really. She's from there. Like generations, they're from there. There might be some French background too, but they're primarily Lithuanian. And so she's very pale. And we stand next to each other. Whenever we go anywhere, people think I'm her cab driver. Even when we got married, right? It was just like, thank you, you can go now. Okay, thank you. Got out of that one. And she, when we first met, I think she's told the story before, but if you haven't heard it, this is what happened. Because I was the departmental student president for the graduate students for our department, and I was meeting, greeting, shaking hands, doing that sort of pseudo-politics of graduate students that you need to do. And I shook her hand. And at this time, she didn't know this, but I was going through like sort of an identity crisis. And I was, everyone I was meeting all knew multiple languages and stuff, and I really, I barely feel like I know English. And that's why I'm teaching you, by the way. And so I thought, okay, well, the correct pronunciation of Sikh is actually Sikh, right? I think if my Punjabi teacher is here, she could confirm that. But, so I went up to UAlberta, and I said, hi, I'm Dalbir. I'm a Sikh Canadian. Snatches her hand away. Sorry? And as she says sorry, she says, I'm a healthy Lithuanian. To which I respond, oh, you guys make those batteries. And for some reason, she's still talking to me. What should I say? Oh, you know what else I want to mention? I want to apologize before I go further to my kids. You're forced to be here. You're forced to hear me talk again. And, but more than that, here's the problem. On the one hand, on the side of our family, we have the whole Eastern European influence, right? Their grandparents, the way they speak, the culture. And then you have my mother, the way she speaks, and the culture. If you hear my kids talk now, if you mix that too, Eastern Europe and the Indian, they all sound like Borat now. Yeah, it's a playing time. Sorry. Maybe you'll grow out of it. Try some spicy food, you'll get another accent. I want to officially welcome you all to this last lecture. As Emerson or Chloe mentioned, I literally, when I got the email, I thought, oh, email scam. That's what I thought. And they weren't asking for credit card information, I don't think. Yet, I haven't been asked that. So I responded, is this a joke or what? What is that? Was happening? Last lecture. And I didn't think it would, like I'd heard of last lecture, but I didn't think it was possible for me to attain such recognition. Because you know how, like, the fleeting state of a sessional instructor's life and so on. So I was especially touched. And this is like, and it almost happened backstage again too, which is good and bad, but I began to cry tears of joy, which I had not cried tears of joy, even, sorry to my kids, when they were born. Because as soon as they came out, hey, Daddy! And I'd sort of cut myself off in that area of my life. I was very scared to receive gifts, very scared. And at that moment, when I received this gift, which it's like a lottery. It's like at some level, I know it's genuine, it's heartfelt from students, but there's a lot of great teachers, and I know at some level there's just good luck that plays into this. And so I felt very fortunate. I was surprised that I was crying. And then my wife started laughing. She was on the phone. I called her right away. And then she started laughing that I was crying. And then she started crying. And so we're both crying on the phone. But all for happiness. So I hadn't felt that since I was a child. And I hadn't felt it since I was a child because I was quite scared of... what was that? I am not a terrorist. This is a microphone. I was worried this was going to happen. That's why you call it the last lecture. That's a morbid title. That made me anxious. It's your last lecture. What do you know that I don't know? Do I need a colonoscopy? What do you know? It's a more, and if I was to take that literally, imagine it's your last lecture. And you talk as though it's the last time you'll ever talk again. I wouldn't talk. I'd be lying on the ground crying. Why? I don't know if that's not very motivational for me. You're going to die. Speak. I do. Okay, so this last lecture. So I don't know what to tell you, so my apologies. But I do, I like that what's happening, that you're having fun. And I think that's one of my key messages. And because if you take my class, what I mean by I don't know what to tell you is that I keep telling my students, you have to assess things and not just take information and just accept it as it is. But I guess with last lecture you get some license for that. You can just go ahead and give the last lecture, and you guys just have to trust that whatever I'm saying is correct. Because I'm the last lecturer and you're not. Yeah, and so I'm very pleased and overwhelmed. I almost lost it, like I said back there, as people were speaking about me, it's a weird experience to hear people speaking about you and they're not saying bad things, right? Because usually it's bad things that people say. But like when you overhear your parents as a kid, it's usually they're grumbling over something. So this is a very nice honor for me. I want to thank the Alumni Association before I go on, before I forget that. I worked with and do work with a lot of great people. I see Mark is here, Mark Arnall, and there was Ed Blackburn was also dean. Pierre Ev is here as well, and all of these individuals have helped me continue doing what I love to do, which more than teaching is connecting with students, is trying to find some sort of individual connection. And I've been in a state of denial, I know, because as classes get bigger and things get more shaky in terms of funding and all that kind of stuff, I stubbornly, maybe like my dad, just wanting to stay up there and do something. Like I stubbornly, and thanks to my family and my kids, because sometimes I'm up late and working too much. So the lessons that I'll give you is that I give you today, I'm also giving myself. So in a sense, I'm trying to tell myself some things as well. So let's go to some more serious things, but not that serious, so don't worry. How many of you have gone kayaking? Why did I ask that? I can't really see. There's a bright light in my eyes. It's like I'm being interrogated again at the airport. It's just horrible. Do you remember that when we were at the airport? Because no one believes we're married. And if we're at the airport, it's just like it's horrible. And the The first time I went, so when we met, I didn't wear a turban. I was just starting to grow my hair long. And then when we went, I said, okay, I'm gonna wear the turban. And I put on the turban, and my wife said, well, you should put on this, was it like a sweatsuit? Put on this sweatsuit. I was like, okay, I'll put on a sweatsuit. I don't wear sweatsuits. But I put it on. She's like, it'll be comfortable. It's on plane right? Yeah, okay, put it on. And then we go and this is in Edmonton. Nice, polite Edmonton made my wife furious with rage. Like, you're ought to smash, like that anger. Because we went to the, first, we were standing next to each other, and the security guard didn't believe that we are married. And he's like, you're married to him? And I'm like, yeah, I ask the same question every day. And then we went in, and they made us stay, it was 3 hours. 3 hours of looking through each one of our bags. And fortunately, they stopped at some point when I mentioned that I have a degree in film and media studies, which I should have mentioned earlier, because then the security guard perked up. Oh, really? So he thought I was a director or something. I was like, oh, yeah, you look great. And then I went with that. I didn't want to tell him I used to mark film studies papers. I didn't want to tell him that. But usually students don't do that if they want to get into a class, right? They're not, can I join your class? That's not, never happened. Not to me. Never happened to me. What was I talking? What am I ever talking about? You know what I want? Here's some note that I reminded myself of. Because when you see how I often prepare is, I spew out a lot of material, lots, 90 pages, and then I just come up and I figure it out, if that makes sense. But I do have a PowerPoint, and I want you to take a look at this, about kayaking. My wife used to be a kayaker, and she never told me this before we got married, which then inevitably made me have to try kayaking. And initially, and I told her, I have a PhD. We're not supposed to kayak. It's in there somewhere, but we're not supposed. I think it's on the official degree. No kayaking. You have a PhD. But she made me go. And I find kayaking to be a nice analogy for life. It works for me, and it works for my wife. I kind of stole it from her, how she talks about kayaking, and then I began ruminating about it years ago. And I thought, kayaking, it's almost like the perfect example for me. When you're on a river, going kayaking, because there's so much that you can control and so much that you can't control. And so today, I'll cover MBS, which stands for more BS. Or motivation, balance, and success. Things that I'm still trying to, I don't think we ever really fully overcome it. I think we just it's like when you're kayaking, you get moments where you're better at it. Where the river and everything, you're at one with the river and everything is working fine. But at times your muscles get tired. At other times your butt gets wet. And it's just it's not always a comfortable ride in our lives. It's not always. So I think we for me, I continually have to contend with these things. One problem is that in terms of motivation, one problem that we might have is external motivation, is that someone else might not think that you're a human being. And this has led me to a way of thinking of myself that fortunately came down to me through my father, but a way of thinking about myself in the sense that, first and foremost, I'm a human being. That's it. Everything else is decoration. Not very good decoration, but it's decoration. I'm a human being. And then what connects me to everybody else is that we're all human beings. That's it. So I I like to think, I don't know much about my grandmother, but I'd like to think that she thought similarly. She used to say that no one can take away your education. But she said this because stuff was taken from her. In her life, the story goes. It's a story. I don't know how legit it is, but apparently it's legit, and it's become something that I refer to. But apparently my grandmother was born into a regional royal family, a Rajput family in Gwalior. And due to murder and corruption, my great-grandmother and grandmother fled. They left. They left wealth and comfort, and they started to live a life of simplicity. So they abandoned money, power, all the stuff that many of us are attracted to. They left all that for a simple life. And my grandmother married my grandfather, hence grandmother-grandfather. See how that works? That's an English lesson, by the way. There'll be a test. And he was extremely simple, so in the sense of he was very spiritually minded. He was a farmer, and he spent most of his time just meditating. That was his thing. That's what he did. And so they were married, and my grandfather has an interesting story too, because he lost his parents at the time there was a plague, and so he lost his parents to that and was an orphan. So him and his brothers, they sort of grew up, and the neighbors kind of took care of them. But they were largely on their own since an early age. And they got together, and I don't want to explain this just yet, but to my kids. But anyway, on that note, I'll come back to my grandparents. When when was this? This was my son was just in, I think, kindergarten, my eldest son, Tyus. And I was driving home, and I almost had a heart attack because he asked me. So what was more nerve-wracking than anything like last lecture or anything was his question. His question was, "Daddy, where do I come from?" And I'm like, I'm driving in the car, he's in the back seat, and let me see. Did you not have this talk with your mother? And he's like, no. And then I tried to explain. Well, it's sort of like, okay, how do I explain this? When you get older, and I started to go this way, and then I was going on just avoiding the question until he fortunately interrupts me and says, "I thought I was from Canada." And I was just like, "Good. Yes, you're from Canada." Sorry about the accent you'll develop, but yes, you're from Canada. And so my father, at a young... So my grandmother, though, she goes from this life of comfort, and my dad asked her when he was a child, like, what do you miss from that life? And he said, the only thing I miss is my access to education. Education, I miss it. I miss that. But she said, you got to learn, because when you learn, people can take stuff from you. You will lose things beyond your control. No matter all the good things you do, no matter how nice you are, bad things happen to everybody, bad people and good people. And she said, but no one can ever take away your education. And that stuck with my dad. I never met my grandmother. And then it passes on to me, and I pass it on to you. And that's been one of my motivators as a student and as an educator, is this idea that no one can ever take away your education. And I've experienced this myself as well, in the sense that I saw my hometown that existed, it's done, it's disappeared. That's pretty extreme. I couldn't have fathomed that as a child, that this would occur, but it was on the map, and now it's no longer on the map. And, and then we were in a program where our department was, collapsed? I don't know, or what do they say? Relocated, or, they have different words for it. They don't say the department collapsed. They use something else. But it dismantled, it was shifted around. So that too happened beyond our control. Wasn't my fault, I don't think. I was just finished my time as graduate student president for the department. I don't think it was my fault, though. I don't think. Maybe Urata's fault. And I get scared about CSJ too. I mean, it's just like don't get rid of this place. I get worried that it's going to happen because I'm like, it's a small camp. When I went to university here, I didn't know CSJ existed. Isn't that frightening? And I speak to students now, and I tell there's a French faculty, and there's a whole thing, and they're all like, where is it? Next to that famous street called White Ave. And like, really? Yeah, you guys go drink in there. You just go a little block down, and you'll see it. So I'm worried, and part of me is worried, but another part of me also understands that whatever good or bad things occur, it's like at some point we don't have control over all of these things. We can try as best as we can, but some things are beyond our control. And one thing that has been beyond my control repeatedly is that someone may not think that I'm a human being. And this happens almost on a daily basis. Regardless of how I've looked, I've tried different looks. When I was a kid, I had long hair. My parents kept my hair. And they'd tie a nice red ribbon on the top and dress me in pink. And for some reason, everyone thought I was a girl for the first 3 or 4 years of my life. And my parents didn't get it. It's like, why do they always think he's a girl? And at some point, it was explained to them, or they figured it out, that in Canada, pink means girls, certainly long hair, and a red bow. All of these things communicate the notion that you are a girl. As a child, though, confused, as a toddler, I didn't really, I didn't care. But I also thought that that's all gender was. Gender is just long hair and the color of your clothes. And when I got to grad school, I realized I was right. But by the way, my parents thought dressing me in pink was neutral because in India, and especially in Sikhism, the idea of pink, the color pink is associated with Amrit Vela, which is the morning time before the sunrise, where it's supposed to be a spiritual time where you can meditate, and so it's denotes the color of the sunrise. So they thought, what's more neutral than that? The sun touches everybody. So that was a nice introduction to me in terms of how there's certain things beyond my control, how people perceive you, how people don't perceive you. And it has led me to one realization, which is I do not believe in any stereotype. None. I don't believe in any of them. Any generalization, any stereotype, I do not believe in any of it. Because I think that all of that is it takes away from a person's individuality. So whatever it is, you can't try to convince me. Because I know whenever I say that, somebody tries to, I'm like, no, it's not going to work. And I think it's a very unhealthy way to think. It simplifies our thinking. And then we should go the opposite way and see how, anybody here know twins? If you meet twins, that you know, they look the same, exactly. But they can be very different, right? They have different tastes, different personalities. So I veer in the opposite direction and like to think that that we should cherish our individuality. So each one of you is a nice, unique snowflake. But I also like to point out that we're in Canada. There's lots of snow. So don't get cocky about this whole unique snowflake thing, all right? And another thing that I found as a recurring issue is when our motivation is too external and it becomes at some point inauthentic. Like at some point there's a meeting point between our internal motivation, external motivation, they can kind of work together. But if we get over concerned with external motivation, we might lose ourselves, if that makes sense. And one big example of motivation that's external is like this American dream. Sorry for the long definition. But what I've noticed, like in my lifetime, and I'm sure others have noticed this as well, is that the American dream, it's not just American, it's become global. And this pursuit of like wealth and material values and material things and success and power and fame and all this stuff, it's very externally minded. And again, I come back to my grandmother's story. She left that for something very simple. So I'm like, what's wrong with her? And then I see this. I mean, you might see this guy. This guy reminds me a lot of Citizen Kane for some reason. I just keep thinking, like, is this guy, like, he's just trying to take over everything? But you have this, like, the way people become obsessed. It's like our greed takes over. And I have a friend of mine who, I remember at one point, because a lot of us in university, when we started university, we were like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? I don't know, I want to be rich. Right? And then I met one person who didn't say that. He's like, I don't want to be rich. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Who doesn't want to be rich? And he said, well, I want to be comfortable, but if I get rich, I'll probably start getting greedy. And I'll want more and more, and then I'll lose myself. And I'm like, oh, I seem stupid now. Because I just was saying what everybody else was saying. Oh, I want to be rich. I want to be rich. And I was like, yeah, I want to be rich. That's what you're supposed to say. And that's another way that we lose ourselves. We have these social scripts that circulate, and we lose a bit of ourselves. And then we get, sometimes in university or in other stages in your life, for me it's like every birthday, but we hit a point after 25. It was pretty much like every birthday, I just stopped counting my age, and I kept going through crises, as my wife can attest to, right? Why are you waking up at 3 a.m.? Crisis! Some of our kids are more dramatic than others, so it's on me. That's the. And so we have, like, if you have too many external motivators, then that part of you, that voice inside of you tends to shrink, because you start to lose yourself by whatever it is that you're doing or chasing or pursuing or going after. So I'm fond of saying, if there's an American dream, I'd like to think that there's a Canadian dream too. It's much more simple, right? Just stay warm. That's it. That's all you need to do. And if anything else extra, that's a bonus. Okay, and in my life too, what I've noticed also is, I'm trying to play fun with words here, but jealousy, extreme thinking, feelings of revenge, confirmation bias, these are all wonderful things. Like in fiction. But in real life, like they're not good motivators. But I know people are motivated by them. And I know in the past I have been, but I don't, like, I throw those things away. All those things. Anytime I feel an inkling of it, well, except for one type of jealousy, I get very jealous over anybody that looks at my wife. Except for that one, I allow myself that one. But any other type of professional or personal jealousy, or extreme thinking, or theories of, like, we get these revenge fantasies, or whatever it is, I throw them all away. Try to let go of them all. Because it's like a poison, and it takes you away from you, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? And when I think of jealousy, like for me, jealousy is not too far away from prejudice. Fear is not too far away from prejudice. Extreme thinking, none of these things are too far away from prejudice. So if you want to avoid prejudice, I think you've got to avoid these seeds of prejudice. And confirmation bias, those of you who took my class know what that is, but it's when we look to confirm what we already know. And we're living in an era where that's more and more possible, in that every time you type into something on Google, it will give you more of the results that you type in. That's how the system is created. So it's like it's just giving you a mirror of what you already think, which I also think it's dangerous, right? Like that we should not just have our ideas continually confirmed, like you're right, you're right, you're right. Yes, I'm a genius. That's dangerous. Instead, I keep trying to remind myself, human first, that's it. I'm a human being. Even the person who, just happened the other day, I was standing at the bus stop and trying to catch the bus to main campus, and I went to like the regular bus, not the special minibus. By the way, CSJ has its own bus. Buses, actually, there's two. And if anyone from main campus ever gets on one of those buses, you will be taken to a magical land where everyone looks similar to you, but they speak a whole other language. It's beautiful. And it exists here. And French, people who take my class know this, but French makes everything sound better, right? No matter, like my French is horrible, but when I hear it, I'm just like, ooh la la, that's just... Everything sounds beautiful. Like, the big example I keep coming back to is like beauty. Beauty. We say beauty. Beauty. It doesn't even beauty. Like, what is that? You're beautiful. Like, that doesn't sound beautiful. Beautiful. It's like someone's being condescending towards you. Passive aggressive. How do I look? Beautiful. But in French, what is it? Belle. Oh. I almost made up with myself right there. That was whew. And the best word I've noticed is like, even the garbage. Poubelle. I don't know how that works, but you made poo belle. Beautiful language. And my wife knows much more French than I do. And when she came to Canada, and she had a friend from, how did you want me to say it? Quebec, right? Yeah, Quebec. Yeah, that's how Andre wanted me to say Quebec, like a proper Quebecer. Quebec. That's an aggressive sounding accent. Huh? Quebec. No wonder we got a lot of professional wrestlers from Quebec. They kick you in the back. La belle Provence. What was I? I forgot again. The what? The bus. Yes, taking you to this beautiful land. Yeah. So check it out. If you haven't checked it out, if I was a student and I was learning French, I would go and hang out at Campus Saint-Jean. And Andre would like me to tell you, so it's not from me, because I'm married. But Andre, what did you want me to say about the student ratio?
There's a lot of girls.
Yeah, there's a lot of girls, or les belles. Still doesn't work out for him, but... But we accept him. He's human. We have to accept him. So I was taking the bus, and some guy drove by, and just rolled down the window and just kind of sneered at me like, ah. And I'm like, really? What are you constipated? I'm a genie. You should be happy to see me, right? And like, I know, like if you're old enough, you know that these things change. And everybody experiences it. It's not just because of the way I look that I experience it. It doesn't matter, whatever your color is, whatever the way you look, At some point in your life, someone will think that you're not human. Someone will treat you that way. And what you need to remember is, sometimes you need to fight that. So sometimes someone will look at you and say, who's transgender, they're not human. Or, you're a woman, you're not human. Or, even if like, you're rich, you're not human. You're poor, you're not human. There's enough of these voices around, and at some point it'll affect some of you. And at times you might need to prove that you are, if you make that choice, and if you're genuinely internally motivated to. Other times you need to just say, screw it, I'm a human. If you don't know that, forget about it. Because you don't have to have time for that. You don't have to let it bother you. When you have these external problems that get into our heads and we make it internal, it can be very devastating, be very dangerous. And like, for instance, when we were kids, I'm going to tell you a sad story. Sorry about this. But when we were kids, it was, and sorry for the language too, but it was people would say words like retard, spaz. Do you guys remember any of these words? Maybe not. Maybe it was a small town thing. And then faggot, being a girl, just being a girl. That was an insult at one point, right? Just, you're a girl. I'm like, what? Why, yes, I am. And I used to try to argue this. I would be like, well, if men and women are truly equal, you calling me a girl is not an insult. But there was a kid who was a great kid, and I think he was confused or something, and but he let that internal stuff affect him. And the last I heard, like, I'm not sure if that was the case. I suspected it was the case because, we were just kids. But I suspected it was the case. And he ended up committing suicide because at some point all these that external noise, he wasn't able to shut it out. He wasn't able to, he made it an internal reality. And that can destroy you, right? These big standards. If you have this huge, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? I want to be president of the world. That's a lot of pressure. And if you're kayaking, it kind of reminds you that you can't really think about anything else but kayaking. Like, you have to just row. And if you're rowing by someone who yells something bad at you, you just keep rowing because the river's going. And you just keep rowing, and you don't let it bother you. You can't let it bother you. You can't let that person inside of your heart because he'll poison your heart. You got to protect that. Does that make sense? So what I find that helps me is whenever I take my ego out of things, that helps me. So serving others, I really feel that helps me. And the reason why I do a lot of what I do for students is because, in part, when I came back to Edmonton, I came back to Edmonton because my dad passed away in 2008, and I came back to help my mom, and I thought I'd just be here for the 8 months of the contract, but fortunately I've stayed on. And years ago I did this thing called Humanities 101 Edmonton, and it was a thing where you would go do outreach in Boyle Street community. It was a great thing. And when I came back, I was like, I need to do, I was thinking of some volunteer work. And I thought, like, students right in front of me, they need my extra time. So I thought, instead of throwing in volunteer work outside, I thought I'll just do more for these students in front of me. Because they need my community outreach. They're my community, and they need my community outreach. Right? Does that make sense? So that I find that if you can include some sense of selfless service in whatever it is you do, even if it's your profession, that is much more fulfilling than anything else. And it's much more motivating as well. It's also good to reflect every once in a while. If you do ever get involved in a relationship or are married, you'll be forced to reflect repeatedly. Think about that. And be open-minded. Like, you need to be open-minded, not just about other people, but about yourself. This is what we often forget. Because, again, that's a way where we look out too much. You need to think about yourselves, be more open-minded to yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't beat yourself up too much, right? Just row the boat and smile. Look around. There's things to enjoy. And you'll feel free in those moments where you're just paying attention at all the gifts that life has to offer you. Right? When I was talking before how I was like, I deliberately resisted joy, even though, those of you who've taken my class know that I can be quite silly. And I like hearing laughter. But myself, I was scared of receiving and experiencing joy. So when I got this award, I liked the breakthrough that sort of came through, where I'm much more accepting. Because I used to be paranoid. I would be like, well, if something's good happens, something bad's going to happen. I know. Now I'm just like, screw it. Rowing down. Hey, look. Oh, that's a beautiful tree. Yeah, it's beautiful. And you keep rowing. You enjoy the tree. Because it's only going to be there for a while. And at another point, you'll see probably some messed up tree. Messed up. Like, people were there doing stuff with that tree they shouldn't have been doing. Or around that tree, and they left their things there. And it's just like, But it's like a superstition. I had to let it go. And sometimes we get into that there are ways that we can control and things and so on. We can't. It's just, we get gifts, we should accept them. Which brings me to this. I figured the answer out, right? To be and not to be, that's the answer. Or one of the answers. It's like when you do one thing, you're not going to do another thing. But if you think about that other thing you're not doing, you're not going to do the one thing that you're supposed to be doing or that you're doing right now. You're doing it. You're in the boat. You're rowing. You can't think, at that moment, you can't think, oh, I wish I was making pasta. It's like, why are you thinking about pasta? The river's, you're going to fall out the boat. That's a direct quote from my wife. You gotta row boats, follow my lead. I am not getting wet on this trip. Okay, I'll focus. Don't let your insecurities, the world, or your fears define success for you. Don't let that happen. Or do, because I also want you to think for yourself. But for me, this has been helpful. Because the world can make you feel self-conscious. Again, especially if you internalize all of these things. And you start to ruminate in your head and judge yourself. You know judgment is wrong, right? You shouldn't be judging others. And yet we judge ourselves sometimes, and quite harshly we judge ourselves, right? And sometimes we have stories in our heads, or we have scripts in our heads. I know I have had in my life, where when I was younger, I would, like whenever something bad happened, I couldn't admit that, like I couldn't say sorry. Now I can say sorry. Again, marriage helps. But when I was younger, I couldn't say sorry. I would get angry, get defiant, and just pretend I didn't do anything wrong. And look at my mom like this. Just listen to her talk. When are you going to stop talking? No! Still wouldn't say sorry. But at some point, I started to say sorry. I started by saying, I apologize. Because that's not saying sorry. So I was like, But then I started to see it's like we're not perfect. We make mistakes. Every day, I make a mistake. Again, marriage. I know. And it's a good thing. Like, I seek out mistakes now. I seek out chances or opportunities, and also any kind of challenge where it's very possible that I would fail, right? Again, as my Punjabi teacher will tell you, I seek out these challenges, and I don't care if I pass or fail. I mean, I care. But what I mean, that part of me that was overly concerned about that image, it's like, it's gone. And that's another thing about kayaking. Like before I even got into the boat, I felt myself getting paranoid about things. Like, I've never kayaked before. And what I saw in the Olympics, I was like, no, what? And I have slipped discs, and I got asthma. We got to go to the forest and sit in a boat. What? I'm trying to look tough around this girl, which, by the way, I'm not. This is another thing that I've reached. I genuinely know that my wife is about 1,000 times tougher than me. 1,000 times. And after seeing her carry children and release them to the world, I mean, I get a tummy ache. I need to take time off work. So that's why I wasn't there yesterday, by the way. What's the matter? What's the matter, honey? Tummy hurt. No. Stay home. But like, okay, so we don't want to add more trouble to the way, at least in my experience, life works. Like bad stuff is going to happen, good stuff is going to happen. You can't control any of this. But you can manage your head a little bit. You can tell yourself when you get overly insecure or you're taking something external and making it internal, you can tell yourself, stop. You can tell yourself, no, don't do this. Because no one will know you better than you. Only you will know you. Only you will ever know you. The best relationship you can have in your life is with yourself. Get your hands out of your lap, Andre. That's not what I meant. Why, man? There's hope, okay? But the best relationship you will have is with yourself. And you're always with yourself, even though you go away from yourself at certain times, depending on what's influencing you. You need to explore the inside of you, right? Does that make sense? And again, not in a surgery way, but in a metaphorical kind of way. And don't get stuck. Like I'm trying to make a point about, I couldn't say sorry. You get that point, right? And then I could. But it was also like I was putting narratives into my head. And I was trying to map those narratives onto the world, project them onto the world. And the scary thing is, when I did that, it sort of would happen. So like if I imagine myself like, I got in trouble, Mommy and Daddy don't like me. Oh, it's just like Cinderella. I'm Cinderella. That's it. I'm Cinderella. That means those are my step siblings. And so I'd imagine all these kind of things. And that took me away from reality. And I'm sure none of you have ever done that. But if you have, you know what I'm talking about, right? So I tried to stop doing that and move away from that insecurity. Because we're all sort of on a river. Again, metaphorically, this is a room, don't get worried. And it's like the river flows regardless of where you want to go in life, in your head. It's like it's going to take you somewhere, regardless of where you are up here. So if you are present in that moment while you're on the river, you can manage things. Now, going with the flow, for me, it doesn't mean that you don't work. It doesn't mean you just sit on the river and just go. Because if you just sit there, the boat will just go in whatever direction. You'll get stuck, or it'll flip over. Sometimes it means you got to work a lot to go with the flow. You got to work with the river. And you got to figure out, okay, this is how I need to go. And then you'll hit a state where everything, it feels like you're at one with everything. And that's the other kind of flow. And it's very beautiful if you can hit that state. You can't have that state all the time. But if you hit that state, then you elevate yourself a bit. and you plant a positive seed of hope and your own empowerment and possibility. All of that is inside of you. And you're all capable of making a difference, of changing the world. But the world you need to begin with often is yourself. And if you remember that, I think that can be very helpful. This is the cheesy part. Like sometimes if we judge ourselves too much and we brand ourselves a failure, we are denying our own success. You're already on the river. You're already living life. You are living your life. Don't wait and think, oh, I have to, later I'll live, I'll do later, or I was doing it before, and now I'm not doing it. No! You're on the river. Be in this moment now. You are getting gifts. Life is giving you gifts. You shouldn't be afraid of those gifts. You should accept them. Bad things will happen too, but gifts will happen too. Positive things will happen too. And regardless of what you do, people will think what they think. For instance, the best story in my life of how people have been confused was, I've talked a lot about my dad. I want to talk about my mom in closing. And I didn't talk about her because she had a bad reputation. Her reputation was that, and this is a true story. One day, I came home to school, and the police were outside of our house. And they came into our house with a search warrant for drugs. And I recalled what happened a day earlier. So what happened a day earlier was I came home, and I was walking home with a friend. My friend came, dropped me off. And I told my friend, we should play outside because my mom, she's right now, it's time for her to do pot. And my mom then said, okay, and I said, thanks. She said, you can leave me to do my pot. And I said, and my friend's like, your mom? She does pot? Oh man, dude, you got a great mom. Mrs. Sehmby, excuse me, can I do some pot with you? And she's like, well, it's peculiar, but okay, if you want to try it, come. We'll start with the basics. So I'm like rolling my, come on, what are you doing? So we go, and there's smoke in the living room. She sits us down, cross-legged. You can all do this if you want. And she says, we won't do anything very much. We'll just do some breathing. First thing you need to do is just breathe. Breathing calms you down, de-stresses, gets you in touch with yourself, deep into your belly. Breathe in. Just breathe in. Relax. Breathe out. She's going in and out this. And then, as my eyes are closed, I realize, oh, wait a second. Okay, you know what pot means in English, right? I know Andre does. Marijuana, drugs, all that kind of stuff. But in Punjabi, again, this is like a mispronunciation, but pot. So you can say it louder if you want. Pot. Potta. Not Harry Potter, but pot. Sorry if I spit on anyone. It means like meditation and prayer. So I open my eyes to tell the guy, wait. But he has an incense stick up to his nose. This is the best stuff I've ever had. It's so spicy. The police came to our house the next day for giving drugs to minors. And when the police came, they asked my mom to show her stash. And she's like, stash of what? She didn't even know what a stash was. She was in a stash? She was like, what's a stash? I go, I don't know what a stash is. Because you know what we're talking about? show us your pot. And she like goes to the kitchen. Shows the pot. And the guys, there was a woman and a guy, and the guy looks and he's like, she's high right now. So my mom was cool because she was apparently a pot-smoking mom. Okay, so I'll finish with this. We want to be cool, but sometimes we need to cool it, tell our heads to cool it. Sometimes we go to extremes, but think about balance. Think about the kayak. You need to balance yourself, otherwise you'll tip. And fortunately, my kids, especially my daughter, reminds me when I go to extremes. And sometimes we slip into just acting. We try to play a role, play a part. When, if you're in a kayak in the river, like, who do you have to show off to? Don't show off. Just enjoy that moment and allow yourself to develop, allow yourself to grow. And on that note, I want to thank all of you, because all of my students and this whole last lecture process, which was unbelievable for me. Like, I never fathomed that this would occur on my journey through the river. I want to thank you, heartfelt thanks. I won't cry here. Haven't got to that stage yet, crying in public. Maybe tomorrow, next class. But from the bottom of my heart, the memory of my grandmother, the memory of my father, and my mother, hardworking as she is, and of course my wife and kids and everybody else, all of you. I share with this award with all of you, all the great people I've worked with. This is really a blessing for all of us. So thank you very much. That's it for my last lecture. I think now, oh yes. Thank you. Really, you need to stop it. It's going to make me cry, and you don't want to see that, because I'll be blubbering on the floor. It'll be horrible. I think now it's time for questions, and I guess we have questions. I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I'll see if I can conjure answers if you have questions.
I just want to let everyone know, if you would like to use the microphone, you're welcome to. There's one here. I'll put one over there. You can also just shout it out. And Dalbir has graciously agreed to answer anything we ask him. I made that last part out.
No questions? No? That's okay. Well, if you don't have questions, then nobody has a question, really? That's good. What time is it? Okay. Oh, you do have questions. Okay. What's going to be on the final? I gave the final to Andre. I don't know if he sold it to you yet. He's selfish that way. He's giving me that air horn in exchange for the final. So bring an air horn, and I give you the final in advance. Any other questions? That's a good question. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
If there are no other questions, I also just wanted to let everyone know that you have the opportunity to talk to Dalbir one-on-one, or give him a hug or a high five. Again, I'm making some assumptions that he didn't say hugs were okay.
All right.
But we do have a reception ready for everyone outside. There's some snacks and drinks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Oh. They're trying something with flowers. Oh, okay, yeah.
Have you ever thought of becoming a comedian?
I have thought of that. I've toyed with that idea. Initially, I thought I was going to be a comedian. Initially, I thought this would be Isn't she cute? Look at that. This is Svaya. All three kids are cute because they take after their mother. You're very brave to be out here. Thanks. These are very nice too. Yes, I've thought of it. Initially, I thought that's the way I'd go, but then I got into teaching and stuff, right? And having kids, and I find that to be quite fulfilling. And I don't know. Maybe like I'll still do it, but I mean I do it in class, right? And I was thinking, I've toyed with the idea of throwing in some, like if I was to do something, I would like to get together and formulate, some of you already know this, a Punjabi boy band. That's what I would like to do. I think that would be probably the big thing that I would do. It wouldn't be called InSync, it would be InSing. I tell you why, I want it that way. Tell you why. Okay, I think that's it.
I think that was kind of a high note to end on.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
once
another
again,
question?
I'd really like to. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short. Go right ahead.
So you obviously have a very good relationship with your kids. How does having kids really change your perspective, like before having kids and after?
It makes me understand my parents a lot more. The levels of madness they've achieved and the levels of care. When I first brought home my son, the oldest one, but it happened with all the kids, I was holding Tyus and walking down the stairs. And he was just born 3 days earlier, and I'm carrying this little teeny tiny baby, teeny tiny, and carrying him down the stairs, and automatically all these worries jumped into my head, like, oh no, what if kids don't like him in school? Junior high, it's gonna be horrible for him. And there's drugs. What about drugs? And I hadn't even got down to the bottom, and he was just a newborn. And what I realized at that point is, you can go if you want, was that that's where our parents are at. Like, as soon as you have kids, at least that's where my parents were at. Like, and I called up my dad and I said, sorry. And he's like, sorry for what? And he's like, well, I understand now that when you have a child, it's like you have your life, but it's not your life. It's like you also have this child's life. And you worry about that, like I started worrying as when he was a newborn, and like what's going to happen? How are they feeling? How are they happy? Right? I worry constantly about that, about them. But that's part of caring, right? When you care, you worry. And speaking of final exams, I also worry about how you're all going to do. So. But it's like you channel that into something positive, right? And spending time with and so on, and that tends to work for me. And then kids also, like I've learned so much just from them being around, that they teach me about me. They're like, they show me, they behave in some ways like both of us, right? And then we learn like, oh, I do that too. And then it improves me. Good? Oh, there's more questions. Isn't your ass getting tired? Don't you? There's food, I think. Yeah, okay, go ahead. You can ask a question.
To your talk, with people who maybe struggle with identity and maybe some self-image, what are some active steps that they can take, in your opinion, to actually improve on that thing, on that, so that they can actually start to be more confident?
Okay. To build more confidence, that's like a whole other talk, which I don't think we have time for. But we can talk about it if you want. Yeah? Okay.
You mentioned earlier that when you were on the way to the airport, I noticed that you said that you never used to wear a turban and then you decided to wear a turban.
Yeah.
Was there a specific experience in your life that made you come to that decision? Or
No. Yeah, it's a bad story, but no, not really. It's just my grandfather used to wear one, and then my dad wore one when he moved to up north. And then apparently there was a pool going, like how long he would stay. And then they made a whole thing about like he was fully like in Sikhism. It's not like you just if you wear this you're a Sikh, so it doesn't have the same significance as, for instance, I don't know if you like you get baptized or something. It's like they have a process where it's like it's a greater commitment, and then at some point, if you want, you take what's called Amrit, and then you start wearing all of the articles of faith. One of which is long hair and a turban, but also the kirpan and the steel bangle and so on. And so it's like there's different, I guess, types of Sikhs. And my motivation was I wanted to try it because like my dad, when he was up north, he said after a certain amount of time they would tell him like, well, you can't work and wear a turban. So he took off the turban and he put the hard hat over his long hair. He said, well, you can't have the bangle. He's like, oh, I'll put it in my pocket. And he's like, well, your beard, he would tie it up, roll it up, and tie it in. And he's like, well, it has that little string thing, you can't. And this was the 70s, and they were like hippies, and they were all working with beards and long hair, all out. And he's like, what's going on here? And that's when they told him that, well, you have to cut your hair and not stay or leave. And so he decided to cut his hair and stay to prove the point that he could stay. And I wanted to try it and see what it was like. And then I've taken it. Sometimes I go topless. I just like how it feels now. I kind of like it that way. And the beard, like I used to trim it. And like if you're officially take Amrit, then you shouldn't trim it and stuff, but I haven't. So I used to trim it, and then it's really my daughter kept saying, don't trim your beard because then you look like an alien. And I was like, I said, okay, well, so it's she likes the beard, and my 3-year-old just grabs it, yanks it down, and then he can beat me when we're playing UFC. So I think they like it for different reasons. But there's no special, I don't think, I can make up something, but there's no, I like it, like the way it feels. Yeah. I like what it means too, like in terms, like for one of the meanings, there's multiple meanings, but one is like, you grow your hair long, you kind of just try to manage things as you're going with the flow of things and not try to cut things or control things or anything like that. So I like that, but you don't have to have long hair to believe that. Yeah?
I really like your perspective on life and life lessons and all that. Do you have a blog, or do you, because a lot of us in here are not your students, so we don't...
I did have a blog, and it was called Acadumbia, so maybe I'll start it up again if you want.
No, just because like I said, I like a lot what you...
Sure, yeah.
I'm thinking, boy...
we were thinking of this, right? Because my wife and now my kids... we started making some silly videos, and then my wife just said, stop telling me these jokes. Just go talk to a camera and just say it. Because she's just tired of me, I suppose. So maybe, yeah. Okay. Yep.
Have you come to like kayaking now?
I love kayaking, but I can't kayak very well because I have slipped disc. So I go, see, my problem is, my strength and my weakness is I just really go all in, right? We're going to kayak, whoa! But my body's like, no, you can't do that. And my wife also echoes what my body says and says, so she's, last year we were going to go and then we didn't because she's like, I don't want to take care of you for the next 7 days afterwards when you're lying in bed on painkillers. So, but I really do enjoy it, and I like especially that state of oneness that you get in when you're just you in the river and the paddling. It's kind of like lecturing for me too. That's why I like lecturing. Yep.
When did you decide to become an English teacher, and why did you decide to do that?
Oh, this is an example of on the river, and I didn't really decide. My degree is in film and media studies and comparative literature, and I taught that for the first 5 years. And then I went overseas, and I thought, I had a PhD, and this was my mistake of, I'll put these down for a second, that I thought, I got the PhD, I've done it, I've achieved, I'm a success, and I'll be able to get a job and do all that kind of stuff. And I was in Lithuania. I couldn't find a job, but I had interdisciplinary degree, and I was fluent in English. And so I started teaching ESL and serving as a communication consultant for an International Debate Education Association. And then because and for a couple of years, CSJ had been contacting me, like one of the, Sheena Wilson, who I went to grad school with. So she was working there, and she'd contacted me since she started there, saying that she needed someone to teach English. And I kept saying, well, I don't know French. And she says, but it's very belle. And and she said, well, you don't need to know French in order to teach English there. And so when my father passed away, I decided, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. I've taught literature before. I've even taught English before with my degree. But then, and it just became, I had to cover certain bases, but I got relative freedom to develop it as I did. And then it just became what I do. It's the students really that have kept me going there, in a sense that I didn't necessarily train for it, but I have training for it. I'm not qualified, but I didn't think that I would be teaching English and marking those kinds of essays and so on. It was the way the river took me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So some things like, for example, like as we go through life, we get influenced by, say, media, parents, a whole bunch of other factors that kind of tell us what success really is. But that may or may not align with what kind of a person we are. So what are some things that we can do to really think about what it is that we want in life? What really makes us human, as opposed to, going for that high-paying CEO job, stuff like that?
I'd say push-ups. This is something I think you have to, there's no simple answer for this, I don't think. I think you have to kind of discover it, and even if you have your dream job, it's not going to be a dream in every way. There's going to be, there's always going to be factors that you can't predict, and elements of it that you'll have to contend with. So I think at some point you have to just tell yourself, stop dreaming and start doing. And you should be doing it for an internal motivation. It should be, you don't have to overthink it. Just come back to the kayak if you want as a simple response. But I think that's something you have to continually contend with in your life. But it's if you're on the river and you're kayaking, and so what if or somebody is saying, row this way, somebody else is saying, row that way. It's you know where you are in the boat on that river. You do. Nobody else. Nobody else is in the boat with you. So once you get focused on just that activity, your rowing will become much clearer and more satisfying for you. But it doesn't happen overnight. I think it takes time, and it continually alters. Right? The river keeps moving in directions you don't know. Anybody else? Yeah?
Do you have a book or movie you think everyone should read or watch?
A book or a movie everyone should read or watch? No, if I say it, then my wife will make fun of me. No, I don't know. I like a lot of. Is someone yelling a movie, or we? Yeah. Any suggestions for him?
Say it. She won't make fun of you. Say it.
Yeah, she will. Well, okay, but if you, I'm not going to say it, because last time I said it, I told a friend of mine who was feeling depressed to watch what at the time was my favorite film, and now has become one of my favorite films, it's a 1960 film called The Apartment. But it's about a person who attempts suicide, so it's this little not good thing to give someone who's depressed. But and then even if you watch the movie without my analysis, as my wife has pointed out, it's not that uplifting a film. So, so that's why I'm cautious to give any advice. And there's no secret in a movie or a book, I don't think, right? Like at some point, you have to, whatever it is you're doing, you're forced to settle your head and get inside of you. There's so many ways you can get motivated, and I don't know. We can talk movies for a long time if you want, but I'm not sure if there's any secret book that can help everyone. I think everyone has his or her own path, and you'll find things along the way. And even more than a movie or a book, like I like to say that you write your own book, make your own movie, if that makes sense. Yeah, you have your story, you have your life, you have your voice. Remember, you're a snowflake. But you have. I mean, if you're looking out there too much, I think it can be limiting. Yeah. Oh, that sounds kind of cool. Andre, I'm not your father.